I think a little voice will tell you. There you go.
Okay. All right, here we are. Welcome to the last webinar of 2023 Virginia Mobilizing Main Street Communities. We are very excited to be introducing you to our friend Jennifer Goldman if you haven't met her before. But before I get into the introductions, I need to go through the housekeeping stuff. So meeting controls in Zoom. I think that most of you are pretty familiar with Zoom, probably more so than Teams, but just look at that ribbon at the bottom for the different functions. If you want to mute or unmute, stop or start video, raise your hand. I think, does Zoom have like little emotions so you can cheer each other on? And
Yes,
in the
there are
chat,
reactions.
yeah, so if you have like questions, put those in the chat box there. See, Ellie just showed us how to do a thumbs up in the reactions. And just ignore those red letters in the corner. We do not want you leaving the meeting. We want you to stay. So the purpose of today's huddle,
The three of us are
talk about diverse
really
funding
involved in
plans.
our biggest event of the year, and we don't have.
Who's got their biggest event of the year? Is that Galax? So creating diverse funding sources and plans for your organization. This is going to be the beginning of what we hope will be a long drawn out conversation about how to resource the work plans that your program administrators are helping you to create. And stay tuned on those meetings if you haven't already had one. I know that the vast majority of you have not yet done your work planning. So that's coming up in January and it's very important. All right, so who's here? Go ahead and note it in the chat box. I'm not going to be able to see it, so Zachary's going to scribe those in.
Courtney, can I ask you
Yes.
to hit slideshow from the begin, well, or from this slide so that your slides take up the whole screen?
Jen, I think she needs it like this because we're editing them in time to keep notes so
Yes.
everyone can see
Oh, okay. No,
instead of in presentation mode.
There's
Yep.
a method behind our madness here.
Gotcha. Never mind me.
So yay, Phoebus, Colonial Beach, Covington, Petersburg, Martinsville. I know I saw the Galax folks and heard them.
Can you hear us now?
I typed it in the
I
box.
can hear you.
That's
Yes.
good. I typed it in the box. So we have to apologize in advance. I thought I was muted. My apologies. Jolene is on vacation, so the three misfits are here trying to run the show, and we have a huge event on Saturday. So I apologize if we're not prepared.
No, you're great. You're doing fine. And we have our special guest today, Doug Jackson, who has been pinch hitting for us with technical assistance in Southwest Virginia. So welcome, Doug. And I wanted to introduce to you our new program administrator, Amy Guzelitis, today. But no sooner did she start her new job than she got extremely sick. So I told her to stay home and keep her germs to herself. And we will introduce her to you at a later date when she can stand up and smile. Right now, she's in bed. All right. Well, thanks everyone for introducing yourselves through the chat. We're glad to see everyone is represented here today. I wanted to introduce you to Jennifer Goldman, one of our favorite consultants that we like to work with around organizational development and especially fund development. I know that many of you feel like raising money is an uphill battle that just isn't possible, and she really breaks it down and helps you to find a way. So I am so glad that our bringer of hope and new skills, Jennifer, is going to be with us today. So Jennifer, I think at this point you are going to share your screen, correct? So I stop sharing, right?
If you don't mind, yes, you
Not
can
at
stop
all.
sharing and I will see if I can find mine. Hopefully that'll go bigger. There we go. Right,
Yay.
and don't mind me, I had to move my window of people around so I can see my own things here. I know a lot of you, I've seen a lot of familiar names and faces through the crowd, so it's really good to see you. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm going to go with 1,000,000 years ago. I was a Main Street manager for a community in Virginia myself. I did that for 5 years, and what I usually share with people is I shot myself in the foot right through the door. I have a business management degree that I decided to check at the door on the way in and just let the board of directors teach me how to run a nonprofit, because I thought it's a whole different ballgame. I know nothing about this. And I realized about a year in, I should have been helping to implement more business practices. So when I left there in 2015, I started my own business, hoping to help other nonprofit groups, as many as possible, learn about business and some of the practices that we do so that you can sustain your nonprofits. Because I love nonprofit organizations. I want everybody to be able to fulfill their mission, but in order to do that, you have to make money and you have to be sustainable financially. So having this funding planning piece of the puzzle now and working with Virginia Main Street to help all of you with it is a big passion for me. I'm one of those weird people. I love money. I love talking about money. And I find that the more people I talk to, I find a lot of people are very uncomfortable with talking about money and even less uncomfortable asking for money. So part of this is also, I do some training, more one-on-one that is about how to ask for money, who to ask for. And I don't want anyone to feel like in the funding planning and learning to create a diverse funding plan, we're talking about, scrapping everything you have and go find all new people and all of this stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about leveraging what you have and learning what will fit with what you've already got going on, but also talking about implementing some new things and finding new ways to find money. So for those of you who've done this, I did a workshop called All the Pretty Pennies, which I had done a couple of times before, and I know some of you sat through it more than once. So this is a morphed version of that. I've updated it. I've taken some things out. I've added a few new ones. So hopefully if you've been through that workshop before, you still find something new today. And so we're talking about evaluating the current funding streams that you have already, establishing funding partners for the programs that you have or the programs you'd like to implement. We'll talk about common funding challenges that Main Street programs face and creating that diverse funding plan to support your organizational growth and budget. And I love questions and input, so do not feel like you have to wait till the end, although there will be a question and answer at the end. Please feel free to raise your hand or interrupt and give me feedback or ask questions as we go along. And everybody at Virginia Main Street, if you can help me and shout out if somebody raises their hand, because I can only see a couple people when my screen is this big with the slides. And I'm hoping my buttons will work now. Let's see if I can advance the slide. Here we go. So we're talking about first evaluating what you already have with your budget. And I made up this pie chart of a fictional organization and what their budget might look like just income wise. This is obviously not the whole budget, but we're just talking about that income. And you can see here, this organization has 5 pieces of pie here in this pie chart, labeled by how much money is in each one, what percentage of their budget that is in income. And at the bottom, you can see their income total is $90,000. So my first question, and definitely feel free to just shout out input, is, what do you notice about this? And what do you think about this piece, this pie chart? Does anybody want to mention something they noticed about either the size of the budget or the number of pieces of pie or the sizes of pie?
The biggest chunk is coming from the government.
The biggest chunk is coming from the government. Do any of you here have that? Where, the majority of the income that your organization is getting is from your town or your county? I've seen that a few times. I do see one hand popped up there. And so I think that's natural, especially when Main Street programs are starting out, that the majority of your income or the biggest chunk of your income is coming from the government. Hopefully over time, you start to diversify a little bit more, and your town and county isn't the only sustainable income that you have. But yeah, you can see for this organization, it's a third of what they're bringing in the year. What about $90,000? For some organizations, for some communities, $90,000 might be sustainable. Do any of you have organizations where $90,000 just isn't going to cut it? All right, it's a quiet group. Has everyone had their caffeine this morning? So I'll tell you what I noticed about this and why I put it up. Number one, 5 pieces of pie is okay. It's not great. I'd like to see more diversity. I would like to see, while obviously we don't want your town and county to stop supporting you or to support you in a smaller way, what we'd like to see is a bigger budget where that $30,000 is a little bit less significant. I've also spoken to many groups who feel like they're not getting as much from their businesses or the people in their community that they feel like. So knowing that only 8% of the budget is coming from individuals and families in the community, I would want this group to leverage that and see if they could get more, find more buy-in from the community members that they have, and also maybe more from their businesses. And then, as I mentioned, I'd like to see a little more diversity, and it's community-based. I would want budget to be, I would say for your average medium-sized community, I would want that budget to be double. And maybe someone from Virginia Main Street can chime in and say what a good budget would be for a small, medium, and large group. But I'm a big advocate for paying your executive directors well and treating them like their CEOs. So I would want to see significant salary and payroll, which definitely would mean that budget would need to be furthered up. I'm not saying everybody should make $90,000, but that budget of $90,000, I would think would be spent majority on payroll, and then what's left for programs. So I would encourage you, if you haven't taken a look, to look at your budget just income wise. And if you want to make a pie chart, you can. I think it's a really good visual for taking a quick snapshot at what you have and what it looks like, what those pieces of the pie are, and what percentages you're getting from everywhere. And then one of the tools that I like to use is a variance report, which we can see here. This is just a snapshot of a variance report income-wise, but I'm going to toggle back and forth between those. In the variance report, I think the majority of you are probably working on a fiscal year that goes from July 1st to June 30th. And so right now you're in the middle of fiscal year 2024. So if you're going to put a variance report together, I would urge you to go back to fiscal year 2023, where you have a full 12 months of data that you can work with, and make 3 columns. The first column would be what your organization budgeted as far as income goes. What did the board approve? Where was the money supposed to come from? What amounts were you expecting to get? And then the second column would be your actuals. And if you're using QuickBooks or maybe even any other program, you can do a profit and loss statement, which should show you all of your income streams and how much money you brought in, and put those actual figures next to your budget. And then that third column would be for the variance, the difference. How did you do? Did you think, most of you will have, like, the town or the government is going to give you 30 grand and you got 30 grand. So the variance there is 0. But maybe you thought you were going to get $25,000 worth of business corporate sponsorships and you only got 15,000, which is a variance of $10,000. And, now that I've made that example, I'm not going to do that math in my head, the percentage that would be. But as you see in the variance report that I do, some people in that right-hand column, they'll do the variance in dollar amounts, which is fine. I like to do percentages because I feel like that gives you a better picture of how big that variance really is, how significant it is. And so you want to take a look at all of those numbers on the right-hand column and decide within your organization or your finance committee, whoever is going to be helping you with budgeting and income, What variance, what margin of error are you comfortable with, and what lies outside of that? So we'll go back to this now and look at some of the actual numbers. Like I said, this is just the income side of this. I'm not even taking expenses into account right now. So you can see for this fictional organization, obviously government, they said they'd give us so much and they did. I would love to see somebody's variance report about all zeros down the right-hand column, but that is likely to never happen. Don't expect that. That would be far too much pressure to make every dollar come in as you thought it would. But if you look at this and let's say you're okay with up to 15% of a variance, then we're just going to be looking sort of at the bottom half of these numbers. And you see the Christmas event under promotional events. This organization approved $5,000. That was their goal. They were going to raise $5,000 at this Christmas event, but actually they brought in $3,259, which was a variance of negative 35%. So knowing that that lies outside of the comfort zone of the 15% variance, the next thing we want to do is take a look at why. Not a witch hunt, not finger pointing, just, okay, how come we didn't come out where we thought we were going to be? Why didn't this event work as well income-wise as we expected? And maybe it's a weather thing. Well, it snowed and we had to close the event halfway through. Or maybe something got ordered and it didn't come in on time, or, who knows what that reason is, but you want to take a look at why that is. If it's an anomaly and, well, we normally make what we say we're going to, maybe you don't need to change your budget, but maybe something happened that you can fix next year. Maybe something that you can do a little bit better, or start a different fundraiser in conjunction with the Christmas event that'll start bringing you a little more income. If maybe you look back and you've never made $5,000 with this event, and you really don't think you can, then maybe don't put $5,000 as your goal for income. Then maybe we need to lower that so that we know at the end of the year we're bringing in what we're expecting to, because the goal of this is to then plan your next budget in a way that your variances work out better, so that you are getting closer and closer to planning what actually happens during your year. Because I will show you, as we look now at the expense part of it. Actually, let's go back here. You can see this organization, the total income that they budgeted was $132,000. That's what this organization expected to bring in a year. The actual numbers were $116,861. So the variance is 11%. As you can see there, okay, that's not huge. They came within 11% of what they expected. But because of all the different variances and how they worked out for this organization, when you matched them up to the expenses, they totaled $131,000 expected in expenses, and they spent $129,000. So they actually spent a little less than what they thought. But because of all the individual categories and how they worked out and the things that had a greater variance, you see there that they expected to make $750 at the end of the year, which is not a great amount of profit, but it's something. And then by the end of the year, in actuality, they were $12,000 in the hole. And so if you start planning a little bit closer and a little bit closer, you don't wind up at the end of the year with that unexpected loss. Because what happens then is, where's that $12,000 coming from? Did you have it in reserve somewhere and you can pull it out and save yourselves? Are you expecting your board or your town to cut a check? Where is that extra $12,000 coming from? And what does it mean if you can't get it? Are you not making payroll or rent, or do you have to cut a program short? This can be a big catastrophe at the end of the year. And I don't know if any of you have expected this or experienced this, but all of a sudden you're panicking come May and you start to see these numbers coming out. How are you going to end that year? So we want to plan a little bit better in further evaluating. And this is something I know you guys have seen before if you took all the pretty pennies with me. These are math equations to help you evaluate where your money is coming from and how you're doing, sort of a snapshot of the organization financially. And I don't know about you, I'm a big math and spreadsheet nerd, so I love this stuff. For some of you are like, oh my gosh, keep this away from me. But these are pretty simple ratios that you can do. The current ratio gives you a snapshot, sort of like a balance sheet would, but in a much smaller way. You take your current assets and divide them by your current liabilities. And when I say current, it means within a year. within 12 months. So your current assets would be anything that you own or will own, or maybe that someone owes you that will be payable within the next 12 months. And your current liabilities are anything that you owe or will owe within the next 12 months. And so you want to take those assets and divide your liabilities. Does anyone who took all the pretty pennies know what number you want to come out with when you do this math? Does anyone remember? Silence, crickets. It's 2. So basically what you're hoping for when you do this is to have a 2 or greater. Because what that means is you can take all of your current assets and pay off all of your current liabilities, and you still have that much left over. So you basically own double what you owe or more. And so you're in good standing then, you're comfortable. If you get between a 1 and a 2, you're doing okay. It's not fantastic, but you can still take everything you have and pay off everything you owe, and you're still standing up. You might not be standing stably, but you're standing up. If you come out with something less than a 1, a 0 point whatever, then you would have to take everything you own to pay off everything you owe, and you'd be in the hole. And so we don't want to do that. And we also don't want to be in that situation where we're toward a 1, because then I will thank you, Courtney. Because at that point, and I don't know how many of you experienced like I did, being young and poor and living paycheck to paycheck and knowing you're one chipped tooth or flat tire away from catastrophe. If you take that current ratio and do the math and you come out closer to 1 or less, your organization is in that same boat. You're basically just barely staying afloat, and you're one small disaster away from, from needing to be saved or having to go out of business. And somebody had a question. I did see the hand go up, but now I don't see it, so I don't know who it was.
So I had a question, but you may be about to get to it, teasing out the difference between the amount of largest income stream versus the single largest income source, what the difference is between those 2 numerators. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. And that is next, the reliance ratios that you see to the right. When I say income stream, that is a category, that's sort of a bucket. So that might be government or grant or, the things you saw on the pie chart that were just broad categories. And then your single largest income source would be one particular funder within any of those categories. So if you have corporate sponsorships, that would be an income stream. And say you're getting the most money in corporate sponsorships is coming from your local bank, that would be the income source. So if the income source is more specific to one funder, where the income stream is a category. And what you're trying to do here, and again, you're going to want to get together with whoever's helping you with budgeting and finances in the organization and fundraising, is figure out where that comfort zone is. When you do these ratios, when you take an income stream divided by your income, what is that percentage of your income that you're relying on that one category or that one funder? And are you comfortable with that? Because what we want to do, like we started out, is talking about diversity. And so you never want, I guess it's funding, financial management 101. You never want to put all of your eggs in one basket. So you need to decide where you're comfortable with that. And I can tell you from personal experience running a business, I realized a few years ago, I had one client who was pretty much 2/3 of my annual income. And I was not very comfortable there because even though the relationship was solid, things about my business were changing and I didn't have as much time to focus on that one client. And the services I was offering that one client weren't really within the scope of where my business was headed. So I was coming to a point where I needed to decide, did I want to keep that client because they also took 2/3 of my time in services that weren't aligned with where I wanted my business to go. And that was a really uncomfortable place to be, because then I had to decide, do I want to keep going this way and making all of this money over here, which isn't what I really love doing the most, or do I want to drop them and lose 2/3 of my income and hope that the direction I want to go is going to be lucrative enough? And so that's a really uncomfortable spot to be in. And, you know, speaking as a one-person business, you know, I couldn't take on so much more diversity without freeing up that time. And so, you know, this for you isn't necessarily, you know, trying to give up anything, but just knowing, okay, if one income source or one income stream is such a big portion of my budget, what is the risk? And we're going to talk about gauging risk in a minute. But how can we diversify a little bit more so that we're not so heavily reliant on this one source, just to put us in a more comfortable spot? And I think some of you may have experienced this in the pandemic, if you're really event heavy with income, and then suddenly you couldn't do events, or you had to figure out a very new way to do events. Did anybody experience that during the pandemic? And maybe it wasn't events, maybe it was something else. That suddenly you realized how heavily you were reliant on something that you couldn't do, or that you couldn't do the same way you'd always done it. Anybody want to share a story? All right, well, we'll keep going then. So as I mentioned, you had to gauge the risk then. It's
Jennifer, if you know who's in the room, you feel free to call on someone, girl. I'd like to hear them talk.
Me too. I always advise having coffee before this. So the problem is, while I'm looking at my slides, I can't see everybody. So feel free to call people out too.
It's JB from Hilton Village. I'll share.
Okay, excellent. Because I saw you nodding, and you're one of the few people I could see.
So yes, we were truly only an event-based model like previously. So the pandemic hit us really hard. You know, while the neighborhood understood we weren't having the events, they had no idea about the cost associated behind the scenes with everything else that was going on. And at the time, we were not in the Mobilizing cohort. So much of what we did behind the scenes, nobody even knew, right? So for us, we're looking at it as, oh my goodness, this is our you know, income. However, they're seeing it as, oh my goodness, our neighborhood's not going to have a parade or a festival. Like, this is awful. And we're seeing it from very different perspectives, but all still feeling it. So yeah, I went through it.
I've seen that, and I had that in the organization I was running too, where to the community, you're an events organization, because that's what they see the most of. That's where they participate. That's where they spend their money with you, when in reality, you have other programs and things happening that they're not seeing, because it's not right in their face. It's not something they can really do. And so, you know, the board was always upset that we were known as the events organization, but yet we kept throwing more and more events. And so we had to lighten up our calendar a little bit so that we could do some things, including marketing and awareness, to let the community know what else we do. So yeah, that was a really good example. And thank you for sharing, Jenny. It is also about gaining buy-in for all the other things that you're doing, and having that community notice and feel and see the value that you have of everything that you're doing in the community, not just the things that they can so easily participate in. And so now, as we're talking about gauging the risk, you know, when we looked at those at the ratios of the reliance that you have, you also have to decide, you know, are you comfortable or uncomfortable with the amount that you're relying on any income stream or income source, but what is the risk to that? And, you know, that was what I was talking about with my business, is the risk of having this one client that took 2/3 of my time, but also provided me with 2/3 of the income. The risk wasn't them, it was me, but you need to decide that as well. So what is the percentage of reliance that you're comfortable with, and what are the risks? What are the risks from receiving continued support by your funders? I can tell you, I had a grant one time to launch a program, and that's all that grant was worth. So no matter how well that program did, they were not going to fund year 2 because they were only for initial projects. So we knew in creating this thing that if it worked really well, we needed to scurry about and figure out where funding for year 2 was going to be, because obviously if it went well, we wanted to continue it. So knowing that risk going in made it a little easier to start leveraging that grant for further future grants to continue the program. So you need to decide some of these things for yourselves too. What are the risks? Of course, you know, nobody could see the pandemic coming. You're never going to see some of the risks. But in knowing, back in 2020 that the pandemic was going on, it probably made you evaluate the risk of government funding. Can your town, can your county afford to keep funding you at the same level, knowing that everybody in the community needs a little bit of help right now? COVID recovery acts, obviously the national federal government stepped in and there was some help from there. But we saw a lot of towns and counties backing off of the support of Main Street, not because they didn't believe in it anymore, but just because so many businesses and organizations in the community needed additional assistance. So that was a risk. And then one of the things that I wanted to remind everybody, and it took me a minute to figure out what word to put in here, is what is the opposite of risk? And what I came up with was opportunity. And so some of you might be looking at, how comfortable you are with being reliant on your funders, but also take a look at what are the funders that maybe you're not utilizing to the maximum ability of what they could be giving to you. Maybe you have some relationships with funders, with companies, with other organizations or associations, or just some of your individual donors that they might be able to do more. You might be able to foster a greater relationship with that source and find an opportunity for them to be more involved, to help you financially even more than they do already. And then thinking about all of these risks, how does that affect your budget? What does that mean for you? What will you do next year differently knowing these? And so here are, oops, sorry, I just changed my screen and you all plopped somewhere else.
Jen,
Yes.
we had a comment in the chat from Cynthia. It looks like she has a couple questions. I don't know if she wants to take herself off mute.
Oh, that would be great. Go ahead.
Sunithia, are you still here?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to take myself
Sure.
off mute.
There she
So
is. Now
I
I can see you.
So now I have a couple of questions, and they are go back to some information you have shared a little earlier in your presentation. For us, we are in mobilization phase. So what does a realistic, but I guess the first question, and maybe Rebecca or Kyle could help me with this, would be, what size are we considered for Main Street community, or how do you determine that? And then based upon that size and then being in mobilization, what is a realistic budget amount? And what is realistic numbers or percentages in your pie chart based upon starting up, being in a, for lack of better words, mobilization or startup phase?
I will wait to see if some of Virginia Main Street wants to talk about size, community size.
I'll jump. And if Rebecca and Kyle want to fill in the blanks, that is totally okay with me. So for size, it's the population of your community. And if you're a town or a city, it's the population of the town or city. If you're a neighborhood commercial district, we're still working on the criteria a little bit, but I would consider it the immediate neighborhood that is walkable from the commercial district.
Okay.
And then as far as minimum budget, that is more art than science. It's going to depend on the work plan that you guys put together. So that's why we're really investing in work planning for the next couple of months to find out what it is you need to accomplish. And then we'll build the budget. It'll be a little bit iterative because at the end of your list of things to do, it might be like, maybe this is too much. And then you right size your activity to what you think you can actually raise. But we're doing work planning in tandem with fund development services. So spoiler alert, Jen will be visiting all of your communities in the next few months to actually help you put the resources together to make your work plan come to life. And there may be a little bit of back and forth between the plan and the budgeting, but we're going to give you every resource we can to help you raise that money.
Okay. Just one last question. We are about 35 to 38,000 in population, and we're a city for Petersburg. So so what does that put us at as far as a size, I guess? And
That would
we're
put you in the larger end of the spectrum for
okay.
Main Street program.
And Sunithia, we can get you information on
Yes, ma'am.
what communities of similar size have for their
Okay.
budgets. I
Okay.
know we've talked in Petersburg about, number one, not only are you all a pretty good size in terms of population for Virginia Main Street, your district is very large.
Right.
So thinking about what an executive director would be tasked with, we've talked about that salary range being around $80,000 and then around
Yes, ma'am.
20 for benefits, et cetera. So just to have paid staff, we're looking at $100,000.
Right. But,
And
that's one
then,
person.
right. And then if you want to get to additional staff or thinking about some of those other operations and then what's on that work plan, we,
Right.
extrapolate from there, just like Courtney
Okay.
said. So we're going to
So
get
we
you
need
there.
a lot of money. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
So
We need a lot of funding
Which
sources,
means
is
you
what it
need a
sounds like to me.
compelling work plan that speaks to your stakeholders, and then make that case to your stakeholders about what you are doing or going to be doing that will benefit them and why they should support you.
Yeah.
It is not
Thank you.
impossible. It is not impossible.
And it's something that I like to help organizations with. Of course, you need to know how much you need to sustain your budget and your programs. And knowing that I'm coming in with, funding services, we're not talking so much about the programs, but you need to know the size of the programs, how much is in your work plans, what each committee is going to need to spend, what your overhead is. And then I like to take that further, because I want every organization to have some padding, some room for, a little discomfort for not everything to go exactly the way you planned, but also to come out at the end of the year with income and profit and reserves, to be able to invest in your future, to be able to have additional staff and grow some of the programs or implement new things. So I do like encouraging everybody to think big. And I know a few of you have heard me say this before. I read an article a couple of years ago helping a client with a capital campaign, which is not my specialty. But I was trying to research and do something, and it was talking about, what is the easiest way to raise $1 million? And it has become my favorite example now. Does anybody know what is the easiest way to raise $1 million?
Find someone to write a check for it.
Exactly. Find one person who can stroke you a check for $1 million. And while people laugh, and I laughed when I first read it, yeah, sure. It's not impossible. There are wealthy people, foundations, businesses in every community, whether you know them or have an introduction to them or not. The second easiest way to raise $1 million, get two people to stroke you a check for $500,000. And when you start breaking it down like that, like how many people you would need to make a certain amount of money, it's not a huge amount. You just have to be able to know how to talk to them, be able to ask them, and enter that conversation and foster that relationship to where people are comfortable with bringing you that kind of funding. So it is not impossible. And what we're talking about, going back to the slide, is creating that budget where you know what it is you're asking for, who you're going to be getting money from, where that income is coming from, identifying the risks, knowing what the opportunities are, leveraging things that you already have for greater impact on your organization financially, and adding into the budget any new partnerships, new programs that you're going to be implementing, and any new fundraisers you're going to start having. Oops, oh, too far. All right, clearly I can't scroll. I have to use the buttons. Try this again. Okay, and then talking about your programs and knowing what you need for income. Are your programs generating any income for you? Sometimes we're going out and we're finding grants or separate funders to apply toward our program expenses, but sometimes the programs themselves can be income generators. And here are a few things that you might want to implement in order to get funding through your programs. And let's see if I can move this menu again. Here we go. So sometimes you can offer sponsorships. You can sell plaques or memorials. It depends on the project. Of course, when I say that, I'm thinking more of like design committee type projects where you might have benches or lampposts, bricks, pathways, things like that, that you can sell plaques or dedicate things. You might have fees for service, which happens in a lot of nonprofit organizations. I haven't seen a lot of that in Main Street organizations, but if you do have a program that you can charge a fee for, that might be somewhere along the lines of, we're going to have small business and entrepreneurship classes, and maybe you charge a small fee for each participant. There could be naming rights, title sponsors, or major funders. I'm sure you've all seen this. We've seen names on theaters and stadiums all the time. You could have that for one of your programs. Again, qualify for grants to go with that program, or acquire a partner. And we're going to talk a little bit more about partnerships too. But first, is there any other way? And Rebecca or Courtney, call on somebody if nobody says anything. What other ways can you earn income through your programs? I know I didn't think of everything.
What about merch?
Merchandise to go with your program? Absolutely. I know, has anybody sold merchandise successfully? Like, what's your best seller? What's the thing everybody wants?
I can tell you what people are asking for now is our farmers market merch. We just haven't launched it yet, but we have a 51-week farmers market that we started this year, and yeah, the merch people are asking. I see Kyle just threw in the bid. I wanted to also mention that, but we have learned also about a hospitality tax, or just a restaurant and hospitality type of tax. So we're looking into that too.
Excellent. That's great. And thank you, Kyle. I do not have my chat open. So yes, absolutely. And talking with the government and the businesses, see if there's some sort of a tax or district designation that you can get that might bring you income. I will say, I don't know what else other people have done with merchandise, but I can tell you everything I've ever seen with tote bags, like hotcakes. People will take tote bags all the time. I can tell you I probably have 40 of them in my car right now. Anything else that anyone can think of that might go with your program to be an income generator? All right, we're gonna keep going. So this is something that I think I've done with one or two of the groups that are here, playing the name dropping game, which is really a fun exercise because you never know who knows somebody. And granted, I don't think all of us have celebrities as our best friends. And if you do, you should name them and let your organization try to see if they have extra money that they want to throw at you. But certainly when we start talking about the programs and the things our organizations are doing, there are certain people, businesses, other foundations that might just be a natural fit for coming in and helping with funding or partnerships. So I urge you to talk to your committees, your board, your groups, whoever you have, about the things that you're doing, because that will probably spring to somebody's head, oh my gosh, and I know so-and-so, and they do this thing that would be perfect for that. And as you go around the table, you realize how many people, the people in your organization know that might be helpful and be a good fit for some of the programs that you're doing or some of the fundraisers that you have. So you've all heard the story probably, because it's also a Virginia-based story, about Pharrell Williams. The singer, the artist, and he is from Virginia Beach. And he went in and he started a great amount of investment and awareness in Virginia Beach. And so I urge you to think about, who's the Pharrell from your community? Maybe it's someone who was born there, raised there, maybe they live there now. Maybe there's a CEO, an athlete, or somebody's mom or grandma who is, big corporate CEO person that's in your community. Maybe somebody who graduated from high school there or college in your community. Does anybody have a good example right now of somebody that maybe this brought a person to your head? It doesn't have to be a celebrity.
We do actually in Petersburg. He's a national recording artist named Trey Songs.
Okay. So yeah, and some of these people, they may not be easy to get to. But maybe somebody in your community knows somebody that is friends with them still, or somebody related to them that might be able to offer you an introduction. Are they willing to invest back in that community that they came from? Anybody else?
Jen, does anyone in Warrenton know Robert Duvall well?
A lot of people. There are a lot of Robert Duvall sightings, I will tell you. I remember bumping into him at the Food Lion one day. That's, he's actually very involved in the community, and so is his wife and her assistant. Because they're very heavily involved in the community. They don't just live there and hide. They live there and they're involved there, and Willard Scott too. Yeah, Fauquier County, there are some pretty big communities in Virginia. Anybody else have some big wigs in their community?
We have in Colonial Beach, Torrey Smith, a football player, is from Colonial Beach, and he has already left his mark. He contributed a lot of money towards a park that now bears his name in Colonial Beach. So I'm not sure we can go back to tap him again, but he's a very well-known athlete.
Okay, well, excellent. Yeah, I would say if he's got his name on one thing, he might want his name on something else, and hopefully that didn't take all of his money.
We have another one, though. He sometimes claims he's from Hollywood, California. Blair Underwood is actually from Petersburg and graduated from Petersburg High School.
Oh, that. See, and that's a name I even know. Yeah, that's a great one. If you can get in touch and find out. Of course, you can't blow his cover. If you're immediately going to start telling everyone he's not really from Hollywood, that might not go well. But if you can,
lived around the street from me.
Well, there you go. See, you never know. And some of these are just, affluent people with influence. But you might also just start thinking about some of the programs that you have, and not necessarily somebody famous or somebody rich, but maybe there's somebody in your community, maybe a business, a foundation, that is, you start thinking about it, and that would really make a good fit. And the banks have community funds. Maybe that bank would really want to partner with us. I know a lot of businesses and organizations, you can go online and they will have their core values or their focus for community funds, and maybe something jives. One of the things that I've always mentioned to the Main Street groups that I've worked with is tap into your community foundation. And I'm so sorry to hear that I figured this out a couple years ago. There isn't a community foundation in every region in Virginia, but most regions in Virginia have a community foundation, and they have investment funds there that wealthy donors or just average donors can contribute to. And they have what's called a field of interest, as well as other funds. And so if you can get, within one of their fields of interest, maybe they have something that's for economic development or for historic preservation, or maybe they just know people who have money and are looking for something like one of your programs to help out financially. They're really great organizations to get in touch with. And then talking a little bit more about partnerships, if you do figure out something that you're doing, one of your programs that is a really good fit for, maybe it's the community college or one of the businesses downtown or the community foundation, just a reminder that partnerships are mutually beneficial. So it isn't just about, can we get money from these people? If you're going to start an actual partnership, you have to be willing to give. So what do we want from them? What are we willing to give? What would that partner want from us? It's a conversation that you'll need to have and be flexible. While you may be willing to offer X, Y, and Z, they may want A, B, and C. And see if that partnership can find some mutually beneficial aspects to it. Of course, one of the things you're looking for is financial stability. So bear that in mind. We're looking for a partner who can help us fund this, who can help us be sustainable. But also know that partnerships offer more than just money, and different partners will value very different things. Partners in a formal aspect generally have a say-so in operations. So you might also need to be aware that it's not going to be fully in your control if you're going to put a formal partnership together. And the most successful partnerships have terms and expectations, roles and responsibilities all laid out in writing. So there are no surprises. Hopefully there will be no bad feelings by the end. Everybody should be aware of exactly what's going to be expected of each partner. And then I urge you to think about who you already have relationships with. Who do you have in your community, whether it's a person or a business or an organization, an association, because those are the best partners to have, the ones you already have at least some form of a relationship with, something that you can leverage, take to, to them and say, we would really like to come closer together. We would like your help with this one particular program, and see what you can do there and strengthen those relationships, or what new relationships might make a significant difference. And when I'm talking about these partnerships in your programs, keep in mind, we're really talking about income. And I urge you to not just think about, what'll do this one small thing, but think about what would significantly make a difference to you. Who or what in your community has the power to significantly change what you're doing financially and where your standing is. I know there are a lot of organizations, and they, as rightfully so, no donation is too small. You want as much of the community to buy in as possible, but also have your mind on what could make a significant difference. What would be the difference between that, living paycheck to paycheck and being one little disaster away from ultimate devastation. And I remember a story that I read several years ago, and if you're parents, you probably will understand this, of a mom whose grown son kept coming to her for a couple $100 every month, not making his bills, not being able to pay everything, and always needing a little bit more every month. And finally, one month, it was disparaging for everybody. The kid didn't want to come back to mom asking for money month after month. And the mom, started dreading hearing from her son because it was, oh, how much do you need now? And finally she stopped and she said, okay, enough of this, $100, $200, $300 to pay your bills. What amount of money could I give you right now that is going to change how you do things, that is going to actually make a significant difference in your life, give you breathing room, allow you to find a good job, pay off enough of your bills that you're not just behind again next month? And the number they settled on, I'm just going to make this up, was $10,000. Okay, so mom strokes a check for $10,000. Now the child can pay off the next couple of months' bills while they get the new job, the thing that they want to do, and start putting money aside and being a little bit more responsible instead of just keep coming back every couple $100. And so I urge you to think of your finances that way. What is going to make that significant difference so that you don't always feel like you're running and running and running and fundraising and fundraising and fundraising? So how can we find that bigger net so that you can focus as much on your programs and operations as you are on fundraising? So start thinking a little bit more strategically. And as Courtney alluded to, I'm going to help you do a little bit more of this when we meet next year. But definitely you want buy-in from your community members and all the small donations that you can get, but also keep your eyes on the big picture. What will make that significant difference so that you can grow the way you want to, so that you can do a little bit better and not always feel like you're running behind the 8 ball with the fundraising. And next, we're going to talk about common funding challenges for Main Street programs. So does anybody, what we're going to do it kind of like Family Feud style here. Does anybody know what the number one answer is? Any challenges that you think would be, I won't say that they're number 1, 2, and 3, but one of the top 3. What do you think?
The board doesn't play a big enough role in fundraising.
That is a good one. That's not the one that's going to pop up first, though, but we will definitely talk about that one-on-one when I get there.
Competing with other nonprofits.
Say that again. I'm sorry, Julie.
Competing with other nonprofits.
I did not put that in there, but I have seen communities who feel that way, that there are so many nonprofits in the community that they're competing for dollars. So the first one I put up here was your city and your town, either too little support, they're not giving you enough money, or they are giving you money, but you feel like there's too many strings attached. And the next one, downtown merchants don't support us financially. I hear that a lot. And that you always feel like you're asking the same people for money all year long. So I don't know if you all would rank these the top 3, but these are the 3 things that I hear the most of working with Main Street groups. So we're going to talk about just some easy, possible solutions, things that you can employ. So with your city or your town, too little support, too many strings. I urge you to create an MOU, which I know Virginia Main Street does too, especially if you're, a fairly new organization, you probably have one in place. The organization I was running was so old, we didn't have that. I wish we had, because we had the too many strings feeling in our organization. And an MOU, sorry, I shouldn't use abbreviations. For those of you who don't know, Memorandum of Understanding, which is a formal agreement with your city or your town that lays out sort of that partnership thing that I mentioned earlier, with everybody's roles and responsibilities, who's going to do what, within what timeline. Sometimes it matters to your organization how much money you get when. So for some of you, you might want, say it's that $30,000 I talked about earlier, you might just get $30,000 at the beginning of the fiscal year. For some of you, it might be better if you got it quarterly. So you will want to discuss that timeline, and not just about the money, but I've seen a lot of Main Street organizations be really creative with these MOUs and what they ask their town for, but also what the town is willing to give. I've seen some where you might get office space, or maybe they put you on their cell phone plan and they provide your cell phone. There's any number of things that could go in there. Of course, we're looking for financial support right now, but also be thinking about what you're willing to give. When you're a Main Street organization in your downtown, there's definitely some roles you're taking on that either you should be collaborating with city and town employees, or maybe you're the de facto, almost not a town employee, but you're acting in that role because they don't have an employee in tourism and marketing or economic development. Some communities don't have that at the town level. So notice that, and you might want to put that into your MOU. We're fulfilling this role, not for the whole city or town, but for our downtown. We're doing this part of it, which would naturally come under a town or city employee, and you don't have that. So make sure that goes in there, that you're doing that. I also encourage you to put metrics in, because when it comes down to it, you're going to want to evaluate how this relationship is going, and you're not going to want the town to come back and say, well, you're not doing all the things, and you don't want to have to go back and say, well, but you're not doing all the things. If you put in there what everybody is supposed to provide and what the metrics are, then you can take a look at those metrics at the end of the year and be able to tell if anything is not working well. And things to consider: asking for non-monetary items as well, finding out what the town values. You can always take a look at their, I'm going to get the words wrong now, maybe somebody can help me out. Their town plan, for lack of better words. What is their overall vision for the town for the next 5, 10, 20 years, whatever they've got going, and what part of that can you play a role in? There might be something there that helps you collaborate with them. I always urge people to seek an annual adjustment, because as we all know, nothing stays the same price. Hopefully your staff is getting increases. Materials and supplies go up in cost every minute. If you could get an every minute adjustment, that would be great, but at least annually get a little bit more. Create an agreement that's 3, 5, 10 years long, whatever you can get, so you don't have to keep going back doing this every year. You just have it in place and it's there. That would be great. And then think about what you're willing to give as well, and see what they want. And your downtown merchants don't support you financially. So this is something that I mention a lot when I talk to Main Street organizations: is don't count on your merchants for financial support. I know I always ran into the whole, why should we give you money? You're here to support us, which, it's right and it's wrong. What you do should support and benefit the merchants, but also, you want them to see your value. You want them to be able to go, it's better that you're here, so we want to support what you do because we see the value in that. One of the things that I urge is for each Main Street organization to create a list of tangible, quantifiable things that you do that benefit the businesses, because they may not see it. Like you mentioned, Jenny, earlier, about people in the community not noticing anything else you do other than events. Sometimes your merchants don't see everything else you do either. So make a list of the things that you do that actually benefit businesses downtown, and ask merchants what they value. What is it you're doing that they value? What is it that you could be doing that they would value? And also, in designing those annual sponsorship or support packages, I talked about this, I want to say it was in Martinsville, and Spencer, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but creating 2 different packages. One that is specifically for your downtown businesses that are smaller in amount to make them feel like they can afford to sponsor you, to help you financially. And then one that's larger for businesses that are not in your downtown district. That way you can get more buy-in. So maybe it's just a couple $100 or $100 a year for your downtown businesses, something that makes them feel like they can really buy in and be helpful without breaking the bank. And then those packages have different benefits based on, are they inside the district or outside of the district? So, it's really important to let all of your businesses know that you're there for all of them, even if they can't financially support you. So you don't want benefits to solely be tied to financial support. So let's say you have a downtown directory. All of your businesses are going to go in there because they're all downtown. Doesn't matter whether they give you money or not. But maybe the ones who help you financially get a bigger listing. Maybe it's in bold print. Maybe their logo is there instead of their name. Think about the things that you could do that would enhance what you're already doing for those downtown businesses, if they give to you financially, but that you're still supporting them across the board regardless. And I think that'll help you create a little more buy-in with the merchants. And then feeling like you're always asking the same people for money all year long, I say put a package together that you can take out once a year that has, an annual support component to it, but then also a la carte options. Okay, so let's say it's July and you're starting to ask because it's the beginning of your fiscal year. We've got Christmas events already listed there, all of a la carte, so that we're not coming back to you in November or December. You can say now, I'm going to give you money once a year and I want to support the Christmas thing or whatever it is, or I'm going to give you one bit of money that you can use however you want all year long. And also build a database of businesses that are outside the Main Street district. I talk to a lot of Main Street organizations that when they're talking about business support, they're only talking about their merchants downtown. And there's a whole wide world of businesses that aren't in your downtown. And it would be really great if you start bringing that investment into your community, because just your downtown businesses and community, then you're just circulating money within your community. And the goal here is to bring in from outside, so get other people investing in the downtown. So try to connect to a few of those businesses that aren't in your downtown every year and bring in a little more support from the outside of the community. Maybe it's within your county, maybe it's the next county over. Maybe you've noticed a tourist trend. Well, a lot of people come downtown shopping, but they're from, 30 minutes away. And maybe that's a good community to see if you can get support from. Make sure that your board is telling you about the people that they know who are able to buy in to help you with financial matters. And then as your board and your committees and your volunteers rotate, make sure you keep that up. Who else is within your sphere of influence when these new people are included in your organization? And keep asking money for people all year long that give you money all year long, because those are really good supporters. If you know you have people that you can keep asking for money and they will keep giving it to you, don't stop asking them for money. Those are really good supporters. But you might be able to be a little more strategic about it. So the example here is Jane gives you money, $100 every year, but you keep coming back, and maybe you ask her for $50 every quarter. Maybe say, you know what, Jane, instead of asking you for $50 every quarter, next year, would you be able to make an annual donation of $250? And then I'll leave you alone the rest of the year. She might be able to afford that. And then you save the embarrassment of, I don't really want to go back to her again. Or the next time she sees me, she's probably going to cross the street so she doesn't have to face me and listen to me ask for money again. If you're getting that feeling from people, come back and say, would you be able to do something a little more significant once a year? And you'd be surprised. A lot of donors can. They just don't, because they're just used to, I'll give you $100 or whatever, make you go away. So be a little bit more strategic. The people who do support you are going to support you. So do what you can to make sure you keep that relationship strong. And then Courtney, you have to tell me, or Zachary, like how much time we have. I know there was a break in there and I don't remember what time you planned it for. Can you remind me?
You can just keep rolling. You're fine.
Just keep rolling. Okay. Did I go over break time already?
I don't know.
Okay, great. So the next component of this is about putting that actual funding plan together. And I urge you not to do it all alone. I don't know how many of you here, I see we have 24 participants. I don't know how many of you here are executive directors, how many are board members or committee members. But I remember being a Main Street manager, and I know some of this just fell on me. And I had a little bit of board non-participation throughout the years, and sometimes it's just easier to do things by yourself, and you know all of these things. It's faster if I don't have to explain it. But I urge you to please sit down with your board, your executive committee, your finance committee, whoever is going to be helping you with the fundraising and your income, and have these conversations. They are worth having. And one of the really important things is to share that institutional knowledge, because if you are the executive director or a board member who is just the doer, sometimes it's all up here and nobody else knows. You know, if a bus hit you tomorrow, would your organization still be able to carry forward as they were because they know what's happening, or are you the only one keeping it all up in here? And so we need to share that institutional knowledge and make others in our organization aware of what we're doing, what we have, what we don't have, what we need, and how things go, what that process looks like. And also we want to have these conversations for organizational buy-in, because we want everybody not just to know what's going on, but to believe it, to know what it is, and to really be on board with it. We want everybody moving in the same direction. We have more brains for brainstorming. So one of the things that I enjoy about talking to all these organizational leaders and Main Street programs is I'm not always the smartest person in the room. In fact, I strive to never be the smartest person in the room. And as smart as I am and as great as some of my ideas are, when you get in a room full of people, the ideas keep circulating and everybody's brain works in a different way. So you never know what it is that might come up when you start having these conversations with some of the others in your organization. Somebody might know Blair Underwood and their mother who's across the street and be able to get to them. And you wouldn't know that if you didn't have that conversation. Plus, there's more hands for implementation. You don't have to do this by yourself. You shouldn't be doing this by yourself. Everybody should have a part in this. And also to share those spheres of influence, like I was saying with that name dropping game. You don't know who knows who. And somebody may know someone who could be a really big game changer for you in your organization. And what do we want to talk about? We want to talk about those financial statements, doing those ratios, understanding a balance sheet and where we're standing financially now, what our goals are, where we need to be, and what the business processes should be for us. We want to talk about risk assessment chart. What are the risks? What do we think? Do we think we're always going to be able to make this money and count on the funders that we have now? Do we think some of them are on shaky ground? Do we think there's room for more? I know a lot of people and communities who sometimes community support from the town and the town and the city is really just about, you know, who's in the mayor's seat, who's the town manager, who's on the town council. Sometimes that relationship is a little bit shaky just because we don't know who's going to be sitting in those chairs next year. And we don't want that to be that way. We want to have the MOU in place. We want to have really good relationships and partnerships. And we want to have our income so diversified that, well, it's on shaky ground and we do want to improve it. But if something were to jeopardize that, we know we're okay. And that's where we really want to be. And we want to confirm the risk and comfort levels. I can tell you right now, I have been in rooms with people who are very comfortable with high levels of risk, and I am not. So you need to sort of take the average temperature of the room so that you can talk about the things that are really important to everybody and not get lost in the weeds with every little dollar in detail. And then defining the roles and responsibilities, as I think someone mentioned earlier, you know, does your board have an active role in the fundraising and the budgeting? And we want to define that role for everybody so that they all know. And I know I did walk into a room earlier this year with another group, and I think some of them were a little dismayed that I had to say, everybody here has a role in fundraising in the organization, because some of the board members did not feel like that was part of their job in the organization. And I will tell you differently when I'm in your room too, if any of your board members feel that way. Everybody has a role and responsibility to the organization and its financial health. And so being able to understand what that role is and being comfortable with it, I think helps a great deal with the buy-in piece.
Hey, Jen,
Yes.
I looked it up and we'll take a 5-minute break at your next logical stopping point.
Okay, well, that can be now because this was the first slide in the plan component. So I think now would be a good time. I think we had a 5-minute break put in there.
Yep. Okay, so we'll see everyone back in 5 minutes we'll give you 6 minutes at 12:20. So come on back at 12:20.
All right. Very good. Well, I know it's 12:20. I'm going to wait for Courtney to come back and officially kick us off again. But for those of you who are listening, I just went back through the chat. So thank you all for putting things in the chat room. And I just wanted to say, if you didn't notice it, like I didn't notice until now, Kyle put a couple of things in here that's really helpful. One was a sheet of basically income sizes to budget sizes that are about average, depending on this community size. And then a little further down, there is a link to Virginia Funders, which is great. It looks like a bunch of foundations and organizations that may have, I don't know if it's all grants or just community funding, but some partners that you might be able to find would be appropriate for some of your programs and communities. So thank you, Kyle, for that. I'm just catching up now.
Okay, let's officially begin.
We will officially begin. Okay, let me see if I can reshare my screen. I think it's here. I believe this is what we were looking at previously, and hopefully I can still continue on here. Oops, sorry. Okay, sorry, too many menus are popping up at once. All right, so I don't know. I didn't get a chance to ask if anybody has any questions about this slide or anything we've talked to up to here. Otherwise, I'm going to move forward from this slide, but I'll give you a second. Anybody jump in if you have a question. Such a quiet group. Man, y'all aren't going to get away with this when I'm standing in the room with you. Just so you know. Okay. Next, talking about putting that funding plan together, and we're going to talk about some strategies for growth. Because as I mentioned, nothing ever costs the same year to year, and your organization shouldn't plan to be stagnant or keep the same budget from year to year. So we want to grow, whether that is because we're implementing new programs, whether we're adding staff, maybe you've been working from home and now you want an office, whatever that is, we want to see that organization grow over time. And in addition to the growth that you have within your organization, I will encourage all of you to also be fundraising more than what your budget needs are so that you can plan for that growth. Maybe it is so that you can do a little bit more next year, or maybe it's so that you can invest that money and do something big 5 or 10 years from now. So the first thing we want to talk about is, what are your goals? What are your long-term plans? Will you be hiring more staff? Launching new programs, increasing your marketing budget, whatever that is, we want to talk about what that looks like down the road so that you can start already be getting there instead of every year just trying to get the next biggest chunk to do the next thing. And how will you do more than just sustain your current budget? How will you increase your funding over time? So some of this is about creating a little bit of urgency, like, okay, let's make more money now and make sure that we're financially sustainable and stable, but also let's make sure that we've got our eyes on the big picture. How can we plan for further down the road? And this is where it becomes really essential that everybody in the organization has that role in fundraising, in planning, and budgeting, so that we can have a more comprehensive look at the needs of the organization and have more people fulfilling those roles, because it does work much better, much more easily when all the work plans are being done with all the committees, when all of your finance committee or your executive committee is all hands on deck when it comes time to creating the budget, when everybody in the organization is helping with fundraising. So some strategies for growth might be investing. I do know, I'm sure you have financial wealth management companies with your banks in town. Also, the community foundations have some investment funds that you can work with from them. They have at least one way. There's one way that you can create your own fund and you just give them money. I know the one that was in the community where I was, there was a $10,000 minimum. You give them $10,000, they open a fund for your organization and you can continue putting funds in there, but they will invest it. I think they had an average of 6%. It's either 6 or 8% return annually. And that money you grant back to your own organization whenever you want it. So it could be a little bit every year, might be it sits there for 10 years. But start looking at what nonprofit investment strategies might be available in your community. You may create an endowment. Maybe you have meaningful partnerships. Or major gifts, legacy and estate giving. This is something that I've urged several nonprofits nonprofit organizations to do is to get to know those wealth managers in your community, maybe even accountants, and find out who in the community may be looking for someone that they can give, an organization that they can give major gifts to, either over time, maybe they're looking for a tax deduction, maybe it's somebody without any heirs with a significant amount of money and they're not sure what they want to do with it. But talk to those financial planners, tax accountants, and find out if they know anybody in the community that might be a good fit for giving significant amounts of money to your organization. I know not every community in Virginia is full of a lot of wealthy and affluent people, but there's usually a couple in every community. Or maybe unbeknownst to you, there's somebody with a lot of money who's no longer in your community, but your community means something special to them. You just don't know. So ask around and find out where some of this major giving might come from. And also increase donor engagement. Like that example I said about Jane gives you $100 every year, and sit down and talk to Jane. Maybe $100 isn't significant to you, but maybe she's been doing that for the last 20 years. Can you sit down? Jane, why is our organization so special to you? What is it about us that you absolutely love? How can we get you to, maybe be more involved? Maybe you'd like to do more with us. Maybe you have the capacity to give more. When you start really engaging with some of those loyal donors, you might be able to find that they're willing to do more than they were before, and they just haven't been asked. Oh, sorry. Sometimes my mouse works and sometimes it doesn't. And then talking about the roles and responsibilities, it's sort of like parenting. This organization is your baby. And while there's tons of things you could read out there, it doesn't come with an exact manual. So you have to sit down with the people in your organization, figure out everybody's roles and responsibilities. These are just some general guidelines about roles and responsibilities in a nonprofit. Your board are fiscally and fiduciarily, if that's a word, responsible for the organization. So the very first thing you do when you form a nonprofit in the state of Virginia is you go to the Virginia SCC, which I'm going to get it wrong now, State Corporation Commission, and you form a business. It's literally a corporation. It's an LLC. However, because then you also file to make it a nonprofit, there are no owners of this LLC. It's a nonprofit organization. So in lieu of having owners, the board is fiscally, fiduciarily responsible for the organization. So if something really happens, your board is responsible. So you want them to be as active as possible. They should be looking out for this organization. They are responsible for it. They are stewards of this organization and making sure that it is going in a legal fashion and doing the things that nonprofits are required to do. And these nonprofits, Main Street programs, are there to benefit the downtown community. So your board needs to be overseeing the organizational direction and making sure that you're benefiting the community in the ways that you structured this organization to do. They should be cheerleaders and ambassadors. They should be running around town telling everybody about this fabulous organization and everything that you do, and how wonderful it is to be involved with them, and hopefully leading more people to want to be involved with the organization, to want to give, to make sure that it is still going to be there 20 years from now. And board should be the first to give and lead by example. It was something that I remember, and Kyle, you may laugh at this, I don't know if you remember Sparky, my first board chairman. He was wonderful. He was the first person when we had our annual fundraiser gala to buy his ticket. He was the board chairman and he was a town council member. And he never took a ticket for free. He bought his ticket. He was the first to buy it, the first to go running around to the rest of the town council saying, don't expect us to give you a ticket. Go buy your ticket. You have to show up at this thing. And he would do the same thing. And that's what I loved about him. And I wished every board member were like that. But your board should be the first to give financially, the first to buy the ticket to the event, the first to come and do all the things you want the rest of the community to do. They are the example. And not only are they a board of a nonprofit organization, but they're a working board in most cases for you. There may be some of you with Main Street programs that it's not a working board, but for the most part, I think they are, which means that as a working board, they should be chairing committees and they should be on the committees. So, there's probably not enough committees for every board member to be a chairman, but if they're not chairing a committee, they should still be serving one of your committees. And they should be helping with the operation of the organization. I know a lot of board members have full-time jobs, but this is a commitment as well. And so they need to know that they need to be part of these other aspects of the nonprofit. And then you have an executive director. Hopefully, most of you have an executive director. I believe at this point, all of you do. You're not the brand new organizations. All right, someone from Virginia Main Street, what is it? Got Exploring, right? Exploring Main Street. Some of those do not have an executive director yet, but hopefully where you are, you do. And that executive director is a program manager. They're a coordinator of all of the programs and events and things that you do in your operations. They are the point of contact and the lead for communications. They oversee any other staff that you may have, and they oversee the committees, making sure that the work plans are getting done, making sure that the projects are being carried out. And so I know not all nonprofit organizations or Main Street programs are large enough that there's a full staff and a hugely committed working board. But I tend to think of executive directors like CEOs of corporations. And I know you're not large corporations, you're small corporations, but one of the examples that I like to give, and forgive me if you're too young to get the reference, but think about Lee Iacocca and Chrysler. And how many days do you think Lee Iacocca spent on the assembly line? I'm going to go with probably very, very few, if any, because he would be at the top. I'm going to say the penthouse suite office in the building with, the corner with all the windows, so that, he's on top of the corporation. He's the one peering down with that, 1,000-mile view, and overseeing everything and making sure that it's all working in place and going the way it should. If he was down there on the assembly line as the only assembly line worker making all of the cars all by himself, how many Chryslers do you think would be on the street right now? And so that's my take. I know executive directors have a lot more to do than just stand over here hovering and making sure it's all working. It's a lot more hands-on than that. But your executive director should be able to not do all of the things. And you want that person managing everything and being able to oversee the daily operations and making sure that everything is working in tandem and flowing the way it should. And so I urge you to think of your organization that way. Your executive director is the CEO. And if you can hire additional people, I would urge you to do that. Get the boards and the committees working in the ways that they're responsible for and making sure everybody is fulfilling those roles. Things start to get a lot easier. Things start to roll a lot faster. And also just remember that the executive director is one person. And when you add in all of your board members and all of your committee members, you have a lot more people to help you find money, get money, do the programs, run the operations. Everything starts to work a little bit better that way. Any questions or comments about roles and responsibilities? I know not all of my views are really popular depending on which role you're in.
And if I can just interject, even our program.
I hear someone speaking, but I can't hear what they said.
This is Courtney. Can you hear me?
I do hear you now. Go ahead.
Even our organizations that have a large team of employees, those boards still work. They just work in a different way. So they're still going to be bringing resources into the organization. They're going to be bringing influence. And they still should have an interest in physically showing up for the different programs and projects that the organization is executing. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you. I know I will tell you, when I was running a Main Street program in Virginia, I was so jealous of Culpeper and Jessica. And I know she's not here today, is she? I remember going to visit Jessica in Culpeper and walking in, and there were people sitting all around in her office. And I said, who are all these? It was like a Wednesday afternoon or whatever. And I was like, who are all these people? She said, oh, those are board members. And I almost fell on the floor. I said, what? In the middle of the day on a Wednesday? They come here and they're working on committee projects. And, they just, a couple of them come, every so often. I was so jealous. It was such a great thing to see and witness. And I know their program works really, really well. I hope it's still working as well. I don't see it as often as I used to. But it was just this magical moment of seeing board members volunteering time that wasn't inside of a board meeting and being there at the physical location doing work. And so, you know, if you want to see your executive director light up like I am right now, do those things. Come and just say, hey, I've got an hour right now. You know, what can I do to help out? It makes a huge difference. It really does. One of the other examples that I have of another board chairman that I had when I was in Warrenton, we had a guy who, I mean, you either loved him or you hated him. But he did nothing but spend time walking around town, talking to people. I mean, sometimes it was great, and sometimes you wanted to run away because you knew you'd be there an hour if he caught you. But every now and then he would just walk into my office and put a check on my desk, and I would say, John, where did this come from? Well, today I went to Wawa and it happened to be the manager who was behind the counter when I got my coffee, and I asked her if she knew about us, and she said no. So I told her, and I can only imagine she probably gave him a check to make him go away because there were probably 50 people standing behind him. But we wound up with Wawa as one of our annual sponsors from that day forward. And it was just such a great thing that he did. I know we weren't always the topic that he wound up talking to people about when he wandered around town, but that was what he did. He was a great ambassador, and we wound up netting several business sponsors that we wouldn't have had otherwise, because I would never have thought about Wawa. But these are things that people can do. Some of your volunteers, committee members, board members, even, you know, staff, is you just go and randomly bring it up. You never know who might really be interested in supporting your program. All right, now what does the actual plan look like? So when I create a plan, it looks a lot like the strategic plans that I write. It has, you know, the what, when, how, who, you know, how do you know if it's successful? All of those components go in it. You want to start out by reviewing your old budgets, looking at that variance report, what's needed to go forward. Some of those things will go in your funding plan, those adjustments, any new funding streams that are going to come in. You want to make sure that your funding streams and your programs are lining up. There's nothing worse than having a $20,000 grant that doesn't allow for indirect costs. And you have a $20,000 program, but 5 of it is indirect costs that they won't allow you to do. And then you have that $5,000 gap at the end of the year that you don't know what to do with because there's $5,000 of grant money still on the table, but you can't use it. And so you want to make sure that the programs and the funds you have all match appropriately. I love it when organizations have unrestricted funds because then you can spend that money however you want to. But if you are getting restricted funds, you need to be careful and make sure that what those restricted funds are going toward is enough to cover what you're putting them toward. And to be intentional about the reserves. I want all of you to think we're not going to balance our budget and have expenses and income be equal. I want you to think about bringing in a lot of money, making a lot of profit, having something to set aside at the end of the year, and then thinking about where you're going to put that money. How are we going to set it aside? Just in a bank account. Some bank accounts earn something right now, but it's not much. So if you can build enough reserves to invest them somehow, that would be advisable. The actual physical written plan, I like to make part graphic and part narrative because everybody's brains work in a different way. As I said, it's nice to have that graphic part so you can get quick snapshots and an understanding of the overall. And then the narrative that tells you very specifically what needs to happen, how it's going to happen. And the specifics would be, how much money are you going to get from each income stream? And, you know, maybe you know that. Maybe we know the town's going to give us $30,000 and the town is going to give us $30,000 and we're going to put that in. Maybe there's some wiggle room. Maybe we could talk to the town and maybe if we implement and compromise on some things and give us $40,000. So you need to have those conversations and know how much money you're planning to seek from each income stream that you have. You don't always have to know exactly from each income source. You know, the individual funders, but from each income stream, you know, maybe you'll say $20,000 in business sponsorships without knowing exactly how much money is going to come from each business. But be thinking of those buckets of money, the categories, and then think about who's responsible for securing it. So this is one of the things that I will pound on each Main Street program. I am never going to create a funding plan or a strategic plan for you that has the ownership column, say executive director, executive director, executive director, executive director, because the executive director cannot do all of the things all by themselves. And when I say the owner of each thing or the person who's responsible, you are not responsible for doing all the things in that category, you're responsible for making sure they get done. And so I will choose, this might be a board chairman thing. This might be a committee chairperson thing. This might be the executive director with the town manager thing. And so we will create that as we go along, because we do want everybody to have a role. And then what steps will be taken to obtain the funding. So I'm not just going to put in your funding plan, okay, you're going to get $20,000 in business sponsorships. We're going to talk about in the plan, step by step, how you're going to go about finding that $20,000. Or we're going to create a sponsorship package. We're going to have these many levels. We're going to create a database. All those steps are going to go into the plan. And then also, if it's important, what time of year it's expected. I'm sure all of you have some component of this. I don't know if you've thought about this, but like I mentioned earlier, I had a black tie fundraiser gala that was every September, third Saturday in September, every year. By July, I needed to have spent a ton of money putting this event together. And so somewhere like right at the beginning of the fiscal year, if I didn't have a big pot of money right then and there, I couldn't even put that event together. So it was really important for me to have money at the beginning of July. So you may have some things like that. And when we talk about your funding plan, you'll need to bring those up with me or to include them in your own funding plan if you do your own, of what time of year do we need certain things. Because for some things, it's great to have some income coming in little bits every month. And for other things, you might need a special chunk of money at a certain time of year because you have a special program or event coming up. And then alternative plans. Okay, we say we're going to get $20,000 in business sponsorships. What happens if we don't? How are we going to keep ourselves from getting to the end of that variance report, like I showed you earlier, with that $12,000 loss? So let's say, okay, we only get $10,000 in business sponsorships. How are we going to make up that $10,000? What are the alternative plans? And you always want to have that. And maybe you want to implement some of the alternative plans. So it's like, well, if we make everything work and then we did the alternatives too, then you just have extra money for reserves. And then how will the funding be allocated? The allocation of the funds isn't generally specifically put in the funding plan, but you need to know internally so that you make sure everything matches up. Because it's great if you say we're going to raise $1 million and you raise $1 million, but if your budget of programs was $1.5 million, that won't be good. So you just need to make sure that the funding plan that we put in place matches what you need to spend. And that's going to be something that you'll have to talk to each other about. And when I'm there also, you'll have to make sure I do, because the last thing I want to do is plan you a really successful $250,000 budget when you need $300,000. So we'll talk about what that looks like too. And I think that was the end of the formal presentation. Any other questions? And I'm going to stop sharing just so we can see each other and I can see all of you. And Courtney and Zachary, if you had more slides, you can start sharing whenever you want to. But right now, the rest of the time is yours.
I have
Sorry,
a question. Eric Nelson from Colonial Beach. One of the dynamics that we have in our town is that there are people with significant disposable income here. They tend to be people who have been around town or in town for many, many years, maybe generations. They are not that keen on the changes that they see happening in the town, the new energy, how do you kind of combat people's resistance to change, which is one of the things that we're sort of experiencing at Colonial Beach?
Well, that's hard because there's definitely people with certain personalities, but I think it's not necessarily about change, but what is it that they care about? And when you say new energy, you're talking about different people.
Well, different people, new developments happening in town. They want it to be sort of a sleepy backwater town. They're not really that keen on having all the things that are happening in this town.
It's difficult.
It's basically, as Kyle puts it, it's basically the tension between the from here's and the come here's.
Okay. I know there is a certain amount of resistance, I think, in a lot of downtowns because they're historic in nature. People rely on the history to always be the current thing. And of course, we're moving forward and we're trying to preserve history, but also create new strategies and things. And I say one strategy is to get one person that you can flip, that has influence over the others, that makes other people go, wow, you got that person to change their mind or to like you or whatever, and people start to take notice. I know I did this in Warrenton, and I don't know if you guys remember Sue Feely. She had it was an old historic barbershop that she had turned into, for lack of a better word, I want to say a deli, a tea room. And she just hated everybody. And she hated me just for the fact that I was there, and she didn't like Main Street. She knew nothing about me, but I was a no-no to her. And anytime I had to close the streets to do an event, I heard about it. She emailed her mass email list about it. I was the source of news for her a lot. And, I just decided, because everyone kept saying to me, just stay away from her, just stay. And I said, you know what? She's a Main Street merchant. She's one of mine. Love it or hate it. And so I made sure I communicated with her, just like I communicated with everybody else. When I went to visit everybody in person, I visited her as often as I visited everyone else. And I don't know, I was there probably 3 or 4 years. And we had First Fridays. And she said to me, I have a representative coming to do a tasting that is open to the public on Friday night. Now, it has nothing to do with First Friday. I didn't plan it because you have First Fridays, but if you want to include it on your marketing, that would be okay. And I was like, all right, sure. We'll make sure everybody knows that, your shop will be open late that night. You're going to have an activity there. And you wouldn't believe the number of people who came to me and said, how did you get Sue to stay open late? How did you get her to participate? I said, no, I just sort of shrugged and walked away. But she was one of those people that everybody knew disliked everything. And she participated, whether she believes it or not, she participated. And everybody took note. And so sometimes all you need is that one person that everybody knows is against you, and to really sit down and figure it out. I don't think it was a mistake. I don't think it was a coincidence. I treated her very well. I was very respectful. I included her in everything. And finally, she just decided there was maybe some value to what I was doing. And if you can get somebody to see that, and get others to notice, sometimes that helps. Or sometimes just having those conversations with people and finding out, let's not talk about what you don't like, let's talk about what you do value. What do you want to see here? What do you think will be a solution? I do find a lot of times the people who have the most to complain about and actually have some really good ideas. They have some very strong opinions, but sometimes they create, without even meaning to, some opportunities of something that you can focus on that will help them change their mind. Sometimes.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. See, I see something. Oh, thank you, Doug. Any other questions, thoughts, arguments?
I do have one other question. Sorry, we're going to get all of this presentation emailed to us or something. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I think this is great. I think it's been super interesting, very helpful. This is something we're struggling. Fundraising is something we're struggling with in Colonial Beach, and I think this is perfect. Thank you again.
Oh, you're welcome. And I think they'll also, I hopefully make the recording available. I'll send in the slideshows, and I'll be talking to each of you very soon about scheduling some services for beginning of 2024. And I see, Courtney, you've shared, or somebody did?
Yes, I'm
Courtney,
sharing my screen.
you have more.
Are there any additional questions for Jen or about fund development generally?
I was going to ask one if that's okay.
Yes.
So we have a little bit of a loud voice, right? Sharing that we should really be getting more from our city. And while we all may feel that way, I also am trying to shape my response to include, well, if we want more, we have to know what we're going to do with it, right? So I thank you for the formulas that you shared, because I cannot take on more. So it would require a lot of hands and a working board. And so the idea of having more money sounds great, right? But right now we're receiving a significant gift that was the first time ever. I'm not too crazy about, yes, thank you, Courtney. I'm not too crazy about the parameters of the gift, right? The strings attached and how it's dispersed, but we are receiving it. And I just think that sometimes we get caught up in, we need more money, but we don't really have that clear plan on how we'll spend it. And so thank you for giving us the tools to be able to effectively communicate that.
Oh, you're welcome. I will tell you, if there are no strings attached to the more money, always take more money. You can figure out what to do with it later. Never turn it down, as long as there aren't strings that you can't perform. But also, and I urge you, if I'm allowed to plug myself, there's videos and blogs out there. And one of the things that you're reminding me of was something for, I think it's something like 10 phrases every executive director can use of really trying to engage your board and turning them back onto themselves by, I don't know if you've experienced this, but my board meetings sometimes would wind up just being an hour-long things of great ideas to put on my to-do list. And so some of the expressions are things like, you know what, that's a really good idea. You should talk to the chairman of whatever committee to see if we can put that in the work plan. Or have you spoken to the treasurer, meet with them and see if there's something in the budget? Or that's really good if you could put some research and thought into that and give a report at the next board meeting. Sort of turning it back as yes, it's a good idea. They're all great ideas. We can't do them all, and I can't do them all. So how are you going to implement that? I think that's wonderful. What would you do to make that work? What partner would you bring in? How much money can you fundraise for that? Which work plan does that fit into? And making sure that they know, because a lot of times what I'm finding is board members just don't understand some of their role. And so sometimes asking those questions or making those suggestions of, go talk to so-and-so about that and see if that can work, and making them understand that part of this is their responsibility, is really helpful, I think, to them. Hopefully you don't just butt heads, but give them a better understanding of, you have the power to do this. I'm not the only person with power here who has the ability to do the work. You're empowered to do this. And I think a lot of board members also feel like they came to make a difference, but nobody's asking them to make a difference. And so all they know to do is to show up for their board meetings. Where if you were to turn around and say, hey, you know what, this is a really good thing, and I really want to make sure that it works. So this really needs the hands of all the committees and, or a committee and all the volunteers that they've got. And would you be able to handle doing this? I think a lot of board members benefit from being asked because they want to do more. They just don't know what it is to do. And I think from my own perspective too, I know as an executive director, you see everything day in and day out, and sometimes we take it for granted what's happening, and our board members don't see it. They're not there day in and day out. So sometimes we share that institutional knowledge, like I was talking about earlier, just because they don't know. And as an executive director, I used to take it for granted that all of these things are going on. Don't you know all of these things are happening every single day? Well, no, they don't, because they're not there doing them every single day. So sometimes you just had to fill them in.
One last question before we move on to what's coming up next.
Okay.
Anyone?
Does someone have them?
Maybe not. All right.
Was there a hand?
Is there a hand?
I thought you said
no.
I thought you did that because
soliciting one last question, but I think we're all set.
All right, very good.
Jen, thank you so much for giving us a good foundation about fund development and fundraising. There is a lot to learn and a lot that we can be confident about moving into next year. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how you deal with all of these different communities that you'll be working with in Virginia next year. I think it's going to be really good for everyone. So
thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. For everyone else on the call, the 2024 training calendar is coming soon. You can see that on our website, www.virginiamainstreet.com. And we should have that pretty close to final by the end of this week. With that in mind, the first quarter of 2024 is primarily going to be services that you work out through Jen, through your program administrator. And then we're also working with Arnett Muldrow and Associates to do some planning assessments in your community. So you'll have 3 different site visits, at least in the first quarter, one from Virginia Main Street, one from Jennifer Goldman to follow up on that work planning with some fund development planning, and then one from Arnett Muldrow and Associates to do an assessment of the physical plans that have been made for your downtown district, if there are any, and if not, where we might be able to support a physical planning project near the end of 2024. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for those services that are coming to you as a Mobilizing Main Street community. And also wanted to let you know that during the week of December 11th, so that's next week, all cohort members will receive an email from Main Street America about the new accreditation platform when it officially launches. Zachary Whitlow on our team is the guru for the accreditation platform. Hopefully it will be very user-friendly and straightforward, but we do have an expert on staff if you are in a pinch. The email will contain a platform link, a unique username, and a temporary password. So be looking out for that email. We have just a few minutes left. I wanted to know if anyone had one more thing before we call it a wrap. Hearing nothing, we will see you all next year live and in person. We're very much looking forward to it. And thank you so much from the Virginia Main Street team. We have so enjoyed getting to know you this year. We hope that you have a very happy holiday season, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year. So best wishes to everyone, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you, Courtney, and everybody, all of you. But thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to chatting with all of you next year.